Welcome along to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast. Raf Diallo here. As ever, you can listen in or watch the pod on RTÉ.ie, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you prefer. Former Ireland international Méabh De Búrca will be previewing Sunday's women's FAI Cup final between Athlone Town and Shelbourne, which will be live on RTÉ, as well as Stephanie Zambra's legacy as she closes the chapter on a memorable playing career. Plus, former Shamrock Rovers, Sheffield Wednesday, and UCD midfielder Paul Corry will join us to talk LOI and the Ireland under-21s. But first, we're going to talk about the boys in green and a mixed October window, with a win over Finland last Thursday and last night's 2-0 defeat in Greece. And to sift through all that, former Ireland, Tottenham and Fulham defender Stephen Kelly has joined us. How are you?
Very good, Raf. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. Obviously slightly disappointed after last night's 2-0 defeat to Greece, although maybe it wasn't unexpected given the quality Greece have. But at least we're slightly buoyed by the fact we've seen a victory against opposition of similar standard for the first time in quite a long time, especially coming from behind as well. But when you look at the window overall and these two October games, are you coming out with a little bit more optimism from what you've seen? You know, is it something where you feel like there are small signs of progress, or is the Jekyll and Hyde thing that Heimir Hallgrimsson has mentioned after the Finland game the characteristic that you've seen?
Yeah, I think, well, the Finland game, the fact that we came out second half after being a goal down in what was just a pretty tepid performance in the first half, we just didn't really do much. But then you could just see there was a huge uptake in tempo. We increased our pressure, and the boys really took to the style, the setup worked well. Got a couple of goals, came away with an away win on the back of being 1-0 down, which doesn't happen very often throughout the history of Ireland, regardless of the last few years, which have not been great. So it felt like it was a big moment for the manager, for the team, just to kind of get back into winning ways, get that feeling under their belt, and be able to move on from that. But then Greece was always going to be a different test altogether. They were on the back of a superb win against England, and you kind of feel going into that match, we had to be very cautious and very careful not to overexpand and leave ourselves exposed. And it was just to come away 2-0, I think, is a poor reflection of second half. The first half, Greece were excellent, but it's just hard to take, I think.
Yeah, and let's listen to Heimir Hallgrimsson first before we touch on some other matters. So he was speaking to Tony O'Donoghue last night live on RT2 and the RT Player, and one of the things he does talk about in detail here is the belief issue, which he feels is an issue within the squad at the moment.
Apart from the concession of the goal early, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but like, what in your book changed in the second half?
It kind of feels like once we concede a goal, the pressure is kind of gone. So we start to have more belief in what we are doing. It was the same against Finland. We had then a half time to talk, after the goal. Now it happened very early in the first half, maybe third, fourth minute in the second half, sorry. So no, I thought after the goal we grew into the game. It was more belief in everything that we were doing, passing, playing forward, pressing, and no, we said before the game, we knew there was a wave coming at us. Just the kind of atmosphere is like that, and I thought, even though they were better first half, we stayed in the game, didn't concede a goal. I think the structure kind of held. We held it with structure, but they were better than us by far in the first half.
But nonetheless, Heimir, we defended heroically. And sometimes the half-time whistle is the worst thing that can happen in an Irish team.
Yeah, but we know we can do better. We saw that in the second half. We can do better, and it's just to go and grab that belief in each other, in the team, and start the game with this belief like we played in the second half, with the intensity, with the pressing, with playing forward, with getting the ball in the box, etc. I think that is our identity.
Do you regret not making the changes at half-time, or were you always saying that you'll wait till about the 60-minute mark?
No, half-time we just talked. We knew the first half would be tough with everything going on, and we kind of were quite happy going in 0-0 half-time and just tweak some things so we thought, okay, we will grow from here. But then it was kind of a shock, and we should do better in the first goal for sure.
And that's something that has happened. Ireland teams, I'm sure if you've studied Irish games in the recent past, and conceding that goal straight after half-time from the edge of the box, that is just happening time and time again. Is there anything you can do to analyse that and to fix it?
Yeah, we're trying every training, every meeting to fix these things. It's just we are open in the centre of the team, in the heart of the team. We cannot do that. But still, okay, 1-0 down, tough game, but we could turn it, and we turned it around to our kind of benefit. So got some chances, kept the ball much better, moved the ball much better, and had a chance until the 87th minute to get a point at least out of this game, which would have been, in my opinion, a good result.
And the impact of the substitutes, Jack Taylor on his debut with a couple of chances, Casey McAteer, Festi again involved in a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, I think both this game and last game, the guys who came in proved a point. They want to play, they want to be in the team, and again, some positives to take away. Of course, maybe a lot of positives to take away from this game, but you never want to lose, and you never want to lose at 2-0.
You stopped the bleeding. The victory in Finland probably did that. How hopeful are you for the future now?
It's like I said, it's a good team. It's good players. I'm repeating myself, with maybe too little belief to go into games like this. At this level, you need to, you need to have your chest forward when you play games. You need to be on the front foot, and it seems we need a moment to get that. Normally, to concede last two games, to start playing as we know we can, but. There's belief in this team for sure, and I have belief in these guys, and I hope that people have seen that this team can be really, really good on their day.
All right, so Heimir Hallgrimsson there, speaking to Tony O'Donoghue, and he starts the interview talking about the lack of belief, and he kind of comes back to the same point towards the end. But Stephen, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation as well, and given the nature of international football, you don't get a lot of time to sort of build that belief over time.
Yeah, and it comes with wins. It really does. The belief and the kind of comfort that you get from being in a winning side just rolls on, and you build up momentum, and then you feel good about yourself, and coming into a campaign, we have a great chance to win this game. I don't think you ever go to any match expecting to lose. You never go to any game, but you just know when you're not feeling as confident, or the team as a group, because individually those players could be off playing the club. Look at Troy Parra, look at the boys, they're doing really well. They're coming in from what's been a high-octane winning game situation into what then is kind of being pretty negative of late. But the win against Finland, that should have given us a lift. And I think the interesting point he's making is about how taking a goal for us to react. But I think against Finland, they scored, but we didn't really change until half-time. The manager got us in, and then he kind of, he obviously gave them a bit of a rocket and told them they had to come out and get after them. Whereas on the pitch, as soon as Greece scored, there was an instant change in the team, which was nice to see. It didn't take for the manager to say something. He was able to get his point across in game, and then there was it was second half of the game, and we changed, and we were able to just impose ourselves on the match, which was really, really nice, I think.
Yeah, and from your own time playing with Ireland, when would you say would have been the toughest run? And I don't mean individually, but just as a collective, where when you come together, it was sort of like a difficult period and very hard to dig yourself out of it.
I suppose the toughest time in my period probably would have been in the stand. I think maybe Steve Staunton.
So that would have been right at the beginning of your own time.
Right at the beginning, yes. Yeah. So I was a young player in the squad, and listen, we were still littered with a lot of talented every Premier League players. So, but I just think there was a sense of negativity around the squad, and a lot of time there wasn't being directed at the players; it's probably directed at the manager, which was difficult because for me coming into that stand gave me my debut. So you feel like you owe a bit to the manager that's brought you in and given you that first cap, because there's been managers before him, and at that stage I'd probably been in the squad 4 or 5 times. So that was hard, because you're kind of like, I don't want to let him down. You want to perform, but then the media around it was quite negative, so that was difficult for him to take. And then when the change happened, we just became resolute and resilient, and you kind of knew every game we went into we had a chance. I never felt that we were going to be in a position where we were going to get run over our sides. Listen, every now and again it would happen. You come up against a world-class team, and you just get outfoxed by better players. But for the most part, I always felt that we were in games. So I think under Steve Staunton was probably the most difficult one. But you have to get through that, and you have to be able to bring your club form into the national side, and the players that are playing well then can transform that side within it.
Yeah, because it is that kind of windows thing as we've seen. There's this, September, then the players go back to clubs. The likes of Troy Park gains a bit of confidence at club level. But then is it sort of like a contagious thing when you come back into camp? You're maybe having a great time with your club, but then you kind of come together and is it almost like a muscle memory from the last window that's almost picked up on?
It is, because when you come back in, and like obviously I'm on the other side of it now, and you're analysing, you're scrutinising what's happened and what's gone before. And listen, I'm a pretty positive person in most things I say, and when I try and I always kind of just say how I see it. So it's difficult, and then when there's been such a drop off in the win ratio, and the problem was, I think for us on the outside, you weren't going to the games feeling like they were going to come out with anything. And for us, we can feel like that as the players, they can't. But then that kind of seeps into them as well. So it's difficult to take. But I think the manager seems to have the right idea. We're cutting out some of the nonsense that we were seeing before, from the over expanding. Even though we got caught last night with Creevy, and that, there was a slip of. Yeah, we two poor mistakes in the last two games have cost us 2 goals, and they're things we have to cut out, especially players of that caliber. So you get rid of those, and you think, right, look where we could be.
Yeah, so because one thing Heimir Hallgrimsson said when it was coming into the job was this back to basics, and he repeated the mantra a few times. Do you see a back to, or what did you take from what he had said at the time about back to basics, and do you see a bit of a sea change either tactically or in terms of the approach, especially as you said, there have been a couple of silly mistakes that have been characteristic in the last couple of games?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely been a change, even just down to Creevy kicking the ball. You see how many times yesterday that he, from a goal kick, he turned down the option to play short and played it further up the pitch. And listen, I'm all for us playing the right side of football, but you do it at the right moment, and you do it to warrant the place. And then our best bit of play, we played across the back. Scales played a forward pass, but it's playing forward. It's not sideways, backwards that cause you problems. Like our 2 goals we gave away that we gifted to Greece and Finland were playing sideways and backwards, and we got caught, we got pounced on, because every single team in world football wants to press now. Every single team wants to be high up the pitch and wants to apply that press, because that's how all teams play now. So playing out from the back has a bit more jeopardy to it. So you have to cut those mistakes out. But there has been a definite bit more direct play. And it's like I said, it's not just pumping in the channels. It's actually playing it forward with quality. We lacked a little bit in the first half against Greece. I think Evan Ferguson and Troy were starved. You can see they struggled in it to get balls to feet or quality. But I suppose Greece were dominant in possession. But there's definitely been this change in how we go about it. We're a bit more direct, which I like to see, because horses for courses. You play to your strengths.
Yeah, and you mentioned the press there. From the TV analysis you were doing, when you were looking before the Greece game, just looking back at Finland, you noticed a bit of passivity, I think, in the way that Ireland pressed against Finland. How did that change during that game, and then what did you make of the way they pressed there yesterday?
Yeah, so in the first game, it was chalk and cheese, first half, second half. First half, we were really passive, and we were kind of just sitting in 2 banks of forward, the 2 just pedestrian, almost going back and forth, just trying to cut off passing lanes without actually going to put pressure on them. And I'm kind of thinking to myself, Finland are a similar side to us in the sense that I think we're better than Finland, but I think that they're in a similar sort of a confidence way that if we press them, they could give us the ball up and give us an opportunity. Similar to the way if teams press us at the moment, they were probably lacking their confidence. So I thought they were there to get at, and fair, the manager got that across at half time. And the second half, literally from the first minute, we were high up the pitch, we were pressing, we were getting numbers. There was a trigger. If Evan was to go, he's been followed up behind by the midfield. The centre backs were coming up, full backs were coming up. Robbie Brady was intercepted 3 or 4 cruel passes by just being high up the pitch. So that was huge for us. Greece, slightly different game, because I think they're capable of breaking that press. So you had to be a little bit more cautious about it. And I think in the first half, we were cautious. The shape was right, but we were about 4 or 5 yards further up the pitch than we were against Finland. And we were just in a better position to pounce. Just they kept the ball better. But the second half, when they dropped off, you see our intensity came up. We were able to get after them a bit better. And the numbers in the forward areas were much higher and much more aggressive.
Yeah, and then Evan Ferguson's performance, so 2 starts, and he'd only played 85 minutes of club football leading into this, and then he's played much more than that in the space of a couple of games. What did you make of his performance, and how concerned would you be about his club situation? Obviously, it's very easy in football to react very quickly to a very small sample size, and there's a long season to go, and I imagine his minutes will up themselves, but at the moment he seems to be a bit down the pecking order.
It's really hard, because being a player, being in a situation, I've been at big clubs before, and if you're not playing, all the outside noises, you need to play, you need to play, you need to play. Evan's 20 years of age in a few days, I think. Maybe he just turned 20 now, has he? I think. So
he's in and around anyway. He's a very young man. I think we can agree with that.
So he's a young man, and for us, we're very selfish in that we just want him to play every week, every game, getting goals, and then bringing that into Ireland because we'll feed off that. But it's about his career and how he judges it and how he moves forward. And if Brighton is the right direction for him, I think he does need game time. And I think the manager, there's question marks whether he's going to start both matches, but I think he was absolutely right because he's going to be, there's probably 3 or 4 players that you go will start every game for Ireland, and Evan Ferguson is probably going to be one of them. And if he can't get game time at club level, we have to try and give it to him internationally because those 2 games will stand when it comes to the next window. If he has not played much in between, it means he knows he's gone back-to-back games, started 2 of them, and he's not finished them, but that will be in the bank for him. So it's really important for us that he's playing, but for him, he has to consider his own career. And I think if he is further down the pecking order and he's not making matchday squads, then you're probably thinking, well, listen, let me force something that can happen, whether it goes on loan for 6 months just to prove that we get his fitness back. I think it's important for him.
Yeah, and then Troy Parrott's performance as well. So he was the one playing closest to him, playing off him. Sammy Smodics has played that role, played a little bit deeper there yesterday. What did you make of Troy's performance? And in terms of who's part, if Ferguson is sort of like the nailed on centre forward, who out of the options that Ireland have at the moment do you feel is best playing off him?
It's hard to know. I think it will change. That will change based on the opposition we're playing against. I think Troy yesterday, and I think this is the thing for the manager. The manager, he's come out and said he wants to have a settled 11, which I think you try your best to do. But if you're doing that, that doesn't also mean it's going to go on club form because you're going to have some players that aren't playing, but have warranted the place in the team from their last performance. So whereas Troy, his club form has probably pushed him back into the proceedings again. And you kind of think, right, listen, he's scoring goals, he's playing every week, he's confident. Can we get that on the pitch? Can we see that side of him? Can that then influence the rest of the group? And I think with Troy, it was a tough match for him because we had very little possession in the first half, and it was mostly just filling in his shape, running around. And then, but what he did, he tried. We were outnumbered in time, so we didn't have loads of good possession for him. I think the Finland game would have been better for him if he had got more time in that game. That would have suited the way he's been playing at club level. Just because we were in the sense we had more possession, we looked like a stronger side. I know we got a few moments in that game, but I think for Troy at the moment, I don't know. And then I'm thinking to myself, if you put Smodics in the centrally, that's a real threat in the middle of the park. That you kind of feel if we can get that partnership between him and Evan and find the replacement for him on the left wing, because the left wing, yes, he's done an absolute job. He's done his shift. He's up and down the pitch. He's not neglected his defensive duties. But you feel like with his goal scoring threat and with his sharpness in around the box, it feels like it's almost a waste him being out there and having to do that role. Whereas if we can get him centrally beside a fit and Evan, that link up, I know it's throwback, little and large, but it just seems like that could really work for us. But we're just about getting the right bodies in around them.
Yeah, and then your specialist subject, which of course would be full backs, and of course Matt Doherty was left out of the squad. Although Heimir Hallgrimsson is at pains to say that this is not a long-term situation, that he's not being ruled out definitively. It's interesting tactically. He's gone in the last 3 games now with the natural centre back at right back, and Darragh O'Shea the last 2 games, Andrew Obama-Dele in the previous game against Greece last month. What do you make of that tactical shift and how those players have performed in that position?
I think O'Shea has done well the last couple of games. I think at times they could have been targeted. You see the way they played, even Finland and Greece, when they're in possession and they had time on the ball, they would target that long ball over the top of their head just because if you're centre-back playing out position and the full-back, sometimes you're over-covering and you've left that space. And he dealt with it quite well a couple of times in one-on-ones. That's where centre-backs... But I think Darragh's played a lot there for West Brom. I've seen him play a lot there for West Brom in the early part of his career. So he's capable of doing it. And what it does is it creates an opportunity where you just shift into a tree and you have Robbie Brady, who is playing left back but is an attacking minded left back, is playing left midfield or left wing for a large part of his career and wants to be higher up the pitch. So what you do is you naturally then have a back three that slot into space with Scales as a balance on the left, O'Shea as a balance on the right, Collins in the middle. So it just gives you that kind of off balance, but it's balanced, if you know what I mean. I know that sounds a weird way to describe it, but it's an off balance back four because Brady goes, but then you're back, as soon as you come back in, you're in a solid three that are capable of then dealing with that with two in front. So I don't mind that. And you see, listen, some of the best teams in the world, you look at Guardiola, probably the best centre back in one of the most sought after centre backs in world football, and now he's a left back every week for City. So you can do it, and those players are more than capable of playing those positions and contributing, and it gives you a little bit of solidity going forward if you allow that the other one to go forward higher.
Yeah, and I presume because Dara O'Shea, the natural centre back, isn't as attack minded or naturally that way, that there's a bigger emphasis then on Chidozie Ogbene to try and beat his man. Which he was very quiet in the first half yesterday. He seemed to grow into it a little bit, but there seems to be times where he seems to check back a little bit rather than sort of going
Just
at his man with his pace. Yeah, do you find that frustrating, or do you kind of get where he's coming from, the way he approaches it?
Yeah, it's weird. When you see a player that's naturally that quick and that gifted in the wide areas, and I don't think if I was a fullback playing behind shit, so I would just open my body up and feed it to him. I'd be just like, right, I'm giving it to you every time I can, and if I'm going to overlap you, I'm going to try and overlap you to create space for the inside. But if I can see you're in a one-on-one, I'm not going to occupy that space in behind you. I'm just going to leave it for you and then back you up, because if he's able to take the player on and they cut the line off, then the option just to set it back for you to come on and put that cross in as a fullback coming onto it is a great option. You don't have to eat the space. And a couple of times, Dara O'Shea in the second half, you could see he's bursting forward and Vesti was on. And I was thinking, don't go there, because you're just taking the space in behind where he wants to run into, and you're better off leaving him in a one-on-one, trying to let him get into the box and just backing it up. So yeah, it can be frustrating when you've got wingers that are out and out speed merchants, and they're reluctant to take them on. But that's on you, I think, as a fullback, to sometimes go, listen, just keep feeding the ball, keep giving it to him, and keep putting him in positions where he gets his head up straight away. And then you're on to listen, get on, take him on. I'm here, I'm support, but go at him. If you lose it, I've got your back, but don't worry about it. Just that's that constant. You have to talk to the wingers like that.
Yeah, and then Festy Abasele seems to be a bit of a hybrid in that he started his career as a winger, and then he's been brought back the further he's played in his very young career at this stage. He's played mostly wing back with Watford, since he's joined them on loan, and with Udinese. But could you maybe explain the defensive awareness issues that a natural wing back would have in terms of moving back to full back, especially when the ball is on the other side?
Yeah, so as a wing back, then you if you're playing with a three at the back and you're a wing back, you've got a little bit more security in the fact that third centre back can cover your space. But when you're back into a flat back four and you stay high up the pitch, all you're doing is leaving a massive amount of space in it, which Nathan Collins really doesn't want to get out there, because he knows then he's vacating now with two, and it just leaves you really exposed in the middle of the park. Their goal, and their first goal, comes from us getting slightly caught on the right hand side. Nathan Collins probably overcovers. Scales comes really far across, and then we can't get back across the pitch. And when Scales comes across, he's sliding in, takes a deflection. Very unfortunate, I think, for it to skip over Queeving, because I think he had it covered. But that's just us basically getting shifted across too much, and that can be from the fullback being too high. If you're a wing back, that doesn't happen because you have that central centre back between the two that covers that space. So yeah, it's a job that it's not easy to do, and I think modern day fullbacks, they tend to go on anyway, so they're not concerned about the defensive friendlies. But I think in this team in Ireland, our defending and our solidity is really important. So I think if you're going to play fullback on its own, you have to have that kind of just awareness that you can't be just occupying the forward areas. You have to be covering your centre back and not leaving him exposed.
Yeah, because he did, I think it was only towards the end of the Greece game when they were kind of throwing it at it that he actually slotted in at right back behind Casey McAteer. From the limited amounts you might have seen of him so far, do you feel he would have the defensive awareness to play right back if needed from the start of the game?
Yeah, I think he would. And I think the beauty of it is, and I was lucky enough to be in a position where if you're quick, you can often get caught out of position but still get back in. Like Kyle Walker is the best example of that. Kyle Walker probably go down as the best fullback in the history of Premier League football, but his awareness of his fullback position wasn't always there, but his pace was able to get him out of it. And listen, it doesn't matter if your position is not that great. If you know you can get yourself back in there. It's just when you go too much or you leave too much for the defender to do that's beside you that you get caught. But I think that was perfect for the manager to pull him back into the right back position, because he wasn't going in there to be defensive. He was going in there to be in an extra attacking threat, and we were trying to overload that right side, pin them back for once, because that's where they're quite strong going forward.
Yeah, and then I suppose a word on Robbie Brady. I think he was coming into the Ireland squad just as
Yes.
you were coming towards the end, and it's kind of weird, just I suppose how the injury situations have worked out for this window, that he's suddenly he might not have been wearing the armband, but he's the experienced man in the squad.
Yeah, I actually spoke to Robbie before the Finland game. I had a chat with him. I said, I don't know where we were in the squad together, so it's nice to see him back in. And I think what he does, I think he's one of the few players that has genuine quality at the end of that boot. And I mean, you know that he can deliver it on a sixpence when he's given the right time and space, and from set plays, which we're always dangerous from. You're adding that to it as well. So it's important to a player like that. And then it's one thing getting him in the squad, but is he actually contributing, and is he actually still able to play at the level we need to play at? And absolutely, but it looks of it so far. And the game on against Finland, the second half, I think he was a catalyst. I think for a lot of it, he was high up the pitch. He was winning balls back, assist and a goal. And you're talking, he scored in the 90th minute. He was far post, smashing it in. So there's no signs of slowing down there. So, but it is about managing him. He's playing in the championship now, and that's a lot of games under your belt. So you know that there's going to get a bit of fatigue is going to kick into those legs, and hopefully he can stay injury free for us, because it's going to be an important cog in the team and the way the manager wants to play, especially if he's overloading the right side with me in defensively. So it means we have a three. Robbie has that license to go and a little bit more freedom that we cover his side.
Yeah, and I suppose finally, before I let you go, now that October is over and we're facing into another few weeks of club football, and then back to November with England at Wembley. But before that, Finland coming here. Are you going in with a little bit more optimism?
Yeah, I'm going in thinking that we're not going to finish bottom of the group, which is, I think, is a step.
That's a win.
That's a win. That's a win. And I think we're all I think a lot of people we've come around to that. Going, listen, well, we've got Finland at home, and we know that we can beat them. We should feel confident that we can get a result there. Going away to England, it's a free hit. You're playing against, you're not too sure how they're going to turn up. They could be exceptional, or else they could be mediocre like they were against Greece. So I'm hoping it's the mediocre side and we go and get a good result there. I've been very fortunate enough to play against England a good few times in Ukraine. I've never lost to them. So it's one of those things that it's one of those games that you don't need much motivation to get up for. If you're growing up in Ireland and you've been an Irish support your whole life, the England game is one that you look for. Listen, the disparity between the two squads is pretty big now, so it's going to be difficult, but it's still something you cherish. As a player, you want to play against the best players in the world, and you want to test yourself against the best players in the world. And there's probably no better stage to do that right now with England at Wembley. So everybody be looking forward to that. And then you go thinking, right, we can make sure we get a win against Finland, come away at least not getting relegated and in a position where we, if we're in a playoff for that third place, we stay in the group we're in for seedings and going forward for the World Cup.
Yeah, fingers crossed anyway. But there's about four weeks or so, whatever there is to go. It all comes around fairly quickly. But Stephen Kelly, thanks very much for your time.
Brilliant. Cheers, Raf.
All right, delighted to be joined by Paul Corry now, and we're going to continue chatting a little bit about the Ireland senior team, Paul, and I want to focus more on the midfield side of things, because the midfield balance against Greece last night was kind of interesting in terms of the selection of players, with Finn Azaz taken out and then Troy Parrott, who's a more natural forward, brought in, and it seemed kind of an attack-minded move, considering they're playing a tougher team in Greece than they were against Finland.
Yeah, I was slightly surprised, to be honest with you, Raf, that Troy started the game last night. And I don't mean that in a sense that Troy isn't capable of stepping in and doing a really good job. Just purely from a defensive perspective, I guess. Finn Azaz is probably much more inclined from a midfielder's perspective to pick up positions out of possession of the ball. That probably gives you a little bit more protection and helps the likes of Josh Cullen and Jason Knight to, I guess, just marshal that midfield area. The likes of, say, a Smodix or a Troy Parrott, when you put them into that position, you're putting them in there from an attacking perspective, trying to get them to be more creative when we have the ball, to carry up the pitch and try create chances and link up with the likes of Evan Ferguson. So I can understand why Hallgrimsson went with that side and why he went with Troy, but I think when you do make that selection, you do leave yourself a little bit more open. And I thought in particular in the first half, there were instances where we looked extremely stretched in there. Our back four were getting pulled left to right. The two centre midfielders were getting pulled and dragged everywhere. And that left a lot of gaps that the Greeks were extremely good at exploiting. They were so comfortable in the ball that it made it very difficult for those players. So I wonder if he had the opportunity again would he have gone with somebody like a Finn Azaz or even a Jack Taylor, who's probably a little more defensively minded out of possession of the ball, just to shore things up a little bit more? Because there were certainly times, Raf, where it looked as if we were chasing shadows in that first half.
Yeah, and chasing the game was when Jack Taylor came on as well, and he had a few opportunities. What did you make of his performance? Because for Ipswich, he's been more sort of this impact sub that they brought on, who's actually a bit forward thinking in terms of the way he plays the game.
Yeah, I haven't seen a huge amount of him. I saw a good bit of him when he was at Peterborough before he went to Ipswich, and he certainly has something to his game that can be a threat. He's not one of these players, from what I can see anyway, Raf, that's going to get on the ball in front of the back four and try link play similar to maybe what Josh Cullen will do. And he's maybe not somebody who's got an unbelievable range of passing that's going to carve teams out. What he does have is he's got a really good physique. He's very energetic and he's certainly powerful. And what we saw, particularly when he came on, was that instinct to get into the box, to make up an extra body in the box and be a threat. And that's something that can be very impactful when you're looking at, I guess, trying to get bodies up around Evan Ferguson, or whoever that might be that lead the line. So I thought there was definitely promise in his play. And I think he's certainly somebody who could bring a bit of energy into the middle of the park. Jason Malumbi has tried to do that whenever he's been in there. At times, maybe hasn't shown enough quality on the ball. I think it's very early to make a decision on Jack Taylor whether or not he's going to be able to somebody who's going to take that forward for us. But in the little spell that we saw last night, even when you think of the chances and his instinct to get into the box, there was the header, and then there was the volley where he just got on something off the back of a set piece. So that was promising from his perspective. I'm sure he was delighted to go on the pitch and make a bit of an impact. Whether or not he can be somebody who can start games and take us forward is yet to be seen. Like, really, Raf, he needs to be playing for Ipswich, and he needs to be playing regularly if he wants to find his way into the starting 11 from an Irish perspective. And that's a dilemma that a lot of our players have, but I think in particular for Jack Taylor, if he is to kind of take things forward, he's got to find a way of getting into that Ipswich team.
Yeah, and then Finn Azaz a few days earlier against Finland. What did you make of his performance? He was getting beyond the centre forward from time to time, but then maybe wasn't getting the support once he broke the lines.
Yeah, and we spoke previously about, Troy potentially playing up there with Evan. If we don't go with somebody who's going to partner Evan further up the pitch, you definitely need, whether it's a Taylor and Azaz, somebody who's actually going to be willing to run beyond Evan and get in support of Evan when the ball goes up to him. And Azaz did that well. I think he's somebody who looks very, very comfortable with the ball at his feet. Very willing to accept the ball in tight situations, and he's got good feet to maneuver the ball and get out of difficult situations, which is quite rare actually. Within the game today, you probably don't have too many players who travel with the ball and carry the ball. He's definitely somebody who looks like he can do that. Difficult for him coming in the sense that he wouldn't have played with a lot of those players before, but I thought he did well. He grew into the game as the game went on. And if you think about some of what was good about Ireland, in particular in that second half, it came from that midfield area with energy and enthusiasm and aggression to get the ball back. And when we had it, to play a little bit quicker, and he was good at doing that. So he's certainly somebody who I would like to see a bit more of. I think he did enough within that first game that you could see him building a bit of a partnership with the likes of a Knight and a Cullen going forward. And like I mentioned, without the ball, he probably picks up positions and screens areas that helps the two players behind him. So he did well. I still think when I look at Ireland, Raf, and you think of where the gaps are, for me, it's still very much in the middle of the park. And that's no disrespect to the players in there. They put in a hell of a shift. Jason Knight, Josh Cullen, that must have been tiresome to say the least last night when you're trying to chase the Greeks. I just worry that when we pick up possession of the ball, there's nobody in my eyes who can turn one around the corner into a Troy Parrott in the 10 position, or there's nobody who can risk the ball and break the lines of a press in that squad today. And I think when that happens, sometimes our play becomes a little bit pedestrian and a little bit predictable, and it looks that way and it feels that way. But that's because we just don't have that quality in there. And then we really rely then on the wide players to stretch teams and run in beyond. But if we're looking at kind of our strengths and the weaknesses of that team, I think the biggest weakness we still have today is in the middle of the park.
And I suppose a final point on the senior team, and something I put to Stephen Kelly earlier, which is the idea of back to basics that Heimir Hallgrimsson had come in talking about. Does it look that back to basics to you? I know he hasn't had a huge amount of time, but they seem actually to be they're not as regimented on the ball as I would have expected in those first few games under him so far.
Yeah, and he seems to be willing to say to players like, listen, you need to make your own decisions, and when instances come in a game, you have to be able to use your own brain to kind of work your way out of situations. I think when he speaks about back to basics, Raf, like, so many people get bogged down in tactics and formations and style of play. And yes, that's brilliant to analyze and talk about, but you can only start doing that when you get the basics right. Like, the basics of football are being difficult to play against. We got to stop giving away simple goals that we did over the last two games. When we're out of possession of the ball, you got to be able to get hands on people, make it difficult in possession of the ball. And from an opposition perspective, you want to be thinking, oh God, here we go again, going up against a physical Irish team who are going to be aggressive and in my face. And I don't mean stupid 2-foot attackers. I just mean being a really good defensive unit. And then basics when you're in possession of the ball is not taking too many touches, move the ball quickly, run forward, pass forward, stretch teams, get in behind them. And I think when we did that against Finland, particularly in the second half, we looked a far better team. You know, for too long, we've probably been a nice team to play against. You know, you have it, we have it. We don't really threaten in behind when we're in possession of the ball. So I think when Hallgrimsson talks about getting back to basics, that is something that we have veered too far away from in the last 24, 36 months. I think when we start to get that right and we get that back in our DNA, then you can start talking about, you know, how do we become a little more expansive and elusive in the final third. But I liked that he was being very pragmatic in his press conference about what he expects from players. And yes, there was a little bit more in our play, particularly the second half against Finland is the 45 minutes that you take away from those two games where you say we have to start replicating that a little more from an Irish perspective. And too often we're slow out of the blocks and we're waiting to go behind before we kick into gear. We got to get that right from the beginning of matches.
Yeah, and obviously the seniors window has come to an end, and of course November is when everything will resume in terms of Finland at home and then England away. But the Ireland under-21s are in action in Trieste against Italy on Tuesday, 5 p.m. RT2 and the RT players when coverage starts there. And the equation is simple after what happened against Norway on Friday, which is beat Italy and they qualify automatically on head-to-head results, lose, and they leave the door very much open for Norway to grab the playoff spot that the boys in green currently occupy. But a lot of late goals have cost us during this campaign, and something Jim Crawford has raised as well. We'll play a clip from his interview very, very shortly. But it's this time the late goal definitely was one in which they will have plenty of complaints about, given the fact that a free kick should have been given.
Yeah, and it's not even a debate. Like, I was roaring at the television waiting for the decision to be given, Raf, and your heart really goes out to Garcia McNulty, but also to the whole squad, because so much went into that game. And I think they did enough over the course of the 90 minutes to warrant the 3 points. There's a couple of aspects to this, the way I see it, Raf. It's definitely a free kick and the goal should never stand. But I think if you bring it back a step or two, you have to analyse, why is there a situation with 20, 30 seconds to go where your centre half is in a foot race back towards his own goal and back towards his keeper, where he's under a bit of pressure and under a bit of danger? And if I look at that, and I kind of rewinded it during the game, the back four, the back five, whichever you want to look at, we're too high. Like, we're absolutely too high. There's no situation whereby one straight ball should lead to that encounter between Garcia McNulty and the Norwegian forward. If you're a centre half in that situation, and this is being hypercritical of very young players, but you take 5-10 yards back and you give the centre forward, worst case scenario, the ball into feet, he turns and he gets at you. What centre halves don't like is chasing back towards their own goal. And Garcia McNulty's game probably isn't centered around his physicality and his pace and his strength. It's more about his distribution. I'm sure if they could have that situation back, they would sit a little bit deeper and they would actually avoid, you know, that potential chance from occurring. So that's probably how you avoid that situation. And when you kind of rewind back through the group, this group could be so much different. We could be sitting here already qualified for the European Championships. There was the late Willie Notto goal in Turner's Cross when Italy equalised basically with the last kick of the game. There's the Norwegian goal that shouldn't have stood. And there's the 2 points that we dropped in Tala when Ireland played Latvia. And I'm sure there's a lot of pride within that squad about some of the results they've gotten, but I'm sure there's a real twinge of what could have been when they look at the points that they've dropped along the way. Yes, it carries on into tomorrow evening, where a win would be fantastic and it'd be a huge achievement for Jim Crawford. I'm sure he has that at the back of his mind, that he wants to be the one to take a 21s team to a finals tournament for the first time. But it's a big ask, Raf. It really is. And my worry would be that Turkey have nothing to play for, Norway at home, Norway pick up the 3 points, and then we find ourselves from almost having a guaranteed playoffs spot to absolutely nothing.
Yeah, let's listen to Jim Crawford talking about the goal with Darren Frehill here, the goal that Norway scored, but also discussing the need to bounce back very quickly to face the Italians on Tuesday.
Jim, we're absolutely gutted for you. You threw everything at that. How heartbreaking is that for you to draw it like that in the end?
Yeah, look, it's a tough one to take. We've got tears in the dressing room. We've got a lot of disappointed players. But the thing is, we need to recover quick. We need to get ourselves mentally prepared now. Because we have a huge game against Italy, and the last game we played against Italy here, they scored sort of in similar circumstances, and it's just something that we need to get better at, is seeing out a game. Look, I haven't looked back at the goal. I don't know, was there a foul? I don't know.
Jim, it looked like there was a clear foul. Are you disappointed with the officials there? There was both the linesman and the referee was metres away from it.
Yeah, of course. I had a feeling, but just to confirm that, if you said it's a foul, it's just hugely disappointing because, they weren't causing us too many problems. Okay, sometimes, we left the outside channel open a little bit when we jumped too soon, which caused sort of, minute problems, but nothing that we didn't take care of. And it just, you're going into injury time and we're conceding again, so it's a tough one to take.
And the overall performance, was there a bit of tension maybe in them because there was so much at stake?
Yeah, I thought it was a lot of scrappy play from both teams, and there probably was that air of tension in amongst the players because they knew what was at stake. So what it leaves now is that we sort of need to go to Italy now to win,
It was always going to be tough to go there, but that increases the bit of pressure on you as well, doesn't it? The Italians went toe-to-toe with them here, maybe unlucky not to get the win, but do you think it'll be a different proposition out there?
Yeah, of course it's going to be a different proposition. Italy in their ground, it's going to be a tough game, no doubt about it. They've only got sort of one game this window. They decent prep in June when they went to the Toulon tournament, so they'll be certainly organised and ready. But look, as I said earlier on, now we'll dust ourselves down and we'll be ready for the big one on Tuesday.
Yeah, it's a big one on Tuesday and a tall order as well, given the Italians as tradition. But of course, whether they qualify for Euros or not, this is a developmental squad more so, and the eye is for the senior team. From what you've seen of the 21s over this campaign, who would you be looking at and thinking they'll be quite ready for the step up to senior? I know Moran's already been capped once, Sinclair Armstrong's had a cap as well, and Joe Hodge has been in and around it. But is there anybody else outside of sort of that trio that you look at and think they have potential to sort of work their way into the senior squad?
Yeah, you probably took the names out of my mouth, Rafa, ones who what I would expect. I think Andrew Moran and Sinclair Armstrong are certainly players who, if they continue on trajectory, will have good careers, and hopefully that spans into the international side. Sinclair Armstrong is doing particularly well with Bristol City, having moved there from QPR. So he's somebody who you could definitely see cracking on with his career. I think outside of that, I mean, Sean Rowan had a really good game from left wing back the other night. A constant threat going forward, and obviously got himself on the score sheet, but also nice and aggressive in defence when he needed to be. And then I think other players who spring to mind are probably Boston Lawal, the centre half. so good. Anytime I've seen him either playing in the middle of the park or dropping back into the center of the three, his distribution is excellent. His physicality is perfect for those positions, and more experience under his belt from a first team perspective, and he's maybe one that you could start to consider further down the line. I think it's very early for even the players that we mentioned to start considering them as being starters for the senior team. But anytime you look at a 21 squad, you do think, okay, what 2 or 3 are going to be the ones that could potentially progress on and push on and challenge for the positions within the senior squad. So they're definitely players that stand out, and they're definitely players I think that we can keep an eye on over the next 12, 24 months.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll see how they get on first on Tuesday, and then push on in terms of from next year onwards when the World Cup qualifiers and that come along. But we're going to turn our attentions to domestic matters. And first, we're going to look ahead to the Women's FAI Cup final. And I was joined on Friday by Méabh De Búrca to look ahead to this fixture. All right, I'm joined now by former Republic of Ireland Galway footballer Méabh De Búrca to preview the Women's FAI Cup final. For the third year in a row, Athlone Town and Shelburne will meet. Shells won 2022 to clinch the double. Athlone won their first ever trophy in last year's final and go into Sunday at Tallaght Stadium off the back of winning this year's league. Méabh, welcome along. Another big day coming in the domestic calendar, and the league was decided by head-to-head results, which obviously point to the fact that Athlone had the edge on Shelburne over 2 games in the league this year. In those head-to-heads, what really made the difference in terms of tipping the scales towards Athlone?
Yeah, it's a tough one, but I think it just they seem to get over the line this year more so than the other years where Shelburne's experience had showed. But I think there was a determination from Athlone. Even Laurie Ryan, she was talking after that they won the league. She did say that not many others or no one really gave them a chance. On paper they didn't before the league before the league started. They didn't really have a chance on paper as such because they hadn't done it before. They'd been thereabouts, but hadn't actually got over the line. So I think they just had that quiet determination, and they went about their business, just let the football do the talking, like Ciarán said, and I think that really showed. And they seem to have that kind of team spirit about them as well, and they obviously they managed to get the goals, which is always crucial, and that was really I think a big part of the reason why they managed to get over the line.
And coming into this Sunday Cummins final, in regard to going back to the muscle memory of winning last year, and I know it was by penalties and all that, and that's kind of a bit of a lottery, but at the same time, the psychological boost of having beaten Shells on the grand stage in Tallaght Stadium, how does that change the dynamic this year?
Yeah, they'll definitely go into it with confidence, but like you said, a win on penalties is essentially a draw, really, and they just, they did manage to have the look of the draw there at the end, so they'll definitely have that confidence. But I think on the flip side, Shells will want to be gunning for revenge, and I think Shells on the hunt for revenge is definitely a dangerous team to play against, and they did obviously they had beaten Shelburne in the time previous, and haven't missed out on the league this year and last year. I think they'll be really, really hungry for another trophy, and I think they'll be going out all guns blazing in Tallaght on Sunday.
Yeah, and in terms of how the two teams then set up tactically and where the battle lines are going to be drawn, especially when it comes to possession, pressing, and everything else, how do you expect both teams to set up?
Yeah, I think they'll keep to what they've been doing in the league. Shells are playing that kind of 3-5-2 formation. They're really solid at the back. They've Jess Garrigan, Paris Lattery, and Kiva Keenan, and it's just so much experience there between those back three. It's really hard to break them down. And then I think on the flip side, then you'll see Athlone just playing in their regular formation with their kind of 4-5-1, 4-4-2-2 type style, with the four at the back. They're very, very solid. Then they have, stacks of experience in midfield. I think that'll be a really, really interesting battle. And the midfield, combinations, Laurie Ryan in particular, and then Kate Slevin as well for Athlone, up against the likes of, Alex Kavanagh, Rowan McLaughlin. They have so much talent in there as well, Shells. It's going to be hard to see them. Maggie Pearce, obviously, as well, bringing that experience from abroad too in. So it's going to be a really, really interesting tactical battle as well as kind of, personnel battle too.
Yeah, and usually the strikers can make a difference on these sort of occasions. If we talk about Kate Mooney first from a Shelbourne point of view, obviously we were chatting about her, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and just the form she'd had in the league in terms of getting Shells over the line in certain games. Not enough to get them over the line in the league itself, but she's going to be a hard one to mark, because you look at a lot of her finishes, there are sort of those poachers finishes where there's a rebound and she just happens to be in the right place at the right time.
Definitely, yeah. She's really, a striker that works off instinct, and yeah, she can get those goals, and a lot of them, like you said, poachers finishes, but just so clinical, and it's just so vital for a team that that if you put the ball into the right areas, that she's going to finish it, and that's really crucial, and it could be crucial on Sunday as well. But then you can see the direct comparison with that loan, with Brenda Tabbe too, and both herself and Kate Mooney had joined in the mid season, and they really did contribute to pushing their teams towards, or keeping them at the top of the table. And I think it could come down to it as to who scores, or even who scores more goals between the two of those. And they're obviously backed up by lots of Kelly Brennan on for Athlone. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see, will she operate back at right back, or will she be back as operating in the forward position as well. And of course you have the likes of Noelle Murray, and we all know her class. She's been around the league now for years, but she just has that spark that it's very hard to mark her, and she can do that's something, that bit of magic that might turn the game as well in Shelbourne's favour.
Yeah, and Shells will have a bit of a dilemma when it comes to Brenda Tabbe, because looking at the goals, she does score. She's a massive aerial threat, but as we saw against Bowes as well, when the ball is played in behind and there's a space between what will be Shelbourne's back three and their goalkeeper, she can sort of eat up those yards as well. So there's a lot of decision making there in terms of where do you set your line.
Yeah, that's the thing. And when you do play three at the back, that's where you are susceptible. Is it down the wings, in behind? So with her pace, she did prove dangerous. We saw it throughout the league since she's been playing here. And it's difficult because she's not just a one-dimensional striker, which a lot of strikers can tend to be. Maybe they're better holding the ball up or running behind, but I think she kind of has it all. And like I said, she can just do the finishes as well, and in the air she's such a threat. Obviously, Pearl is very, very good in the air as well, so she'd be hoping to be able to marshal her in the air. But it's just so many different kind of facets to her game that'll be just really interesting to see it in Tala on Sunday.
Yeah, and of course the captains will obviously play a role as well, and they're both inspirational. They've all won plenty of trophies in their time. Laurie Ryan more recently, Pearl Slattery, of course, in recent years as well, has lifted trophies plenty of times on the big days. But just in terms of the role a captain plays on a big day like that, like, just how does it manifest itself?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really important, but I also think that they're so experienced that I don't think anything will change in terms of how they're approaching the game. They'll just take it, and try to calm it down as another game. But Shelbourne in particular have an abundance of leaders. Like, they've 6 players who've played for the senior international team. So that in itself, it does mean that they're just absolutely stacked with girls who have plenty of experience. So I don't think Pearl is definitely never on her own in that regard. And you could argue that maybe Laurie Ryan has a more difficult job of the two. I don't know, but she definitely brings plenty of experience to the role as well, and she's has those girls around her as well that will help her out. And I think they'll just try to calm it down, just to make sure. I suppose the main thing that captains would want from their teams on a day like that would just be to get a good performance in, and not to let the occasion take over. And I don't think that'll be the case. Particularly, like we said, this is the trilogy. They've both been here for the last 2 years, so any kind of chance of those big game nerves and stuff will surely be gone. And I think that's what's going to make it even more exciting, because you would hope that we'll just see a really good game of football then.
Yeah, and obviously the attendance will be interesting to see what the number will end up being. 2022, which was a record, was 5,073 in Tallaght Stadium, and then last year it dropped a little bit to 3,526. But either way, regardless of whether it's dropped or not, it's still it's still a sign of growth to be at 3,500 from where it was previously.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's come on leaps and bounds, and you would hope that anyone around, on Tala, in Tala on Sunday will come out to see it, because it's going to be a great game. Obviously, it'll be on telly as well, but there's nothing really that beats being there and watching a game live too. And I think just the quality of football and show, that's one thing this is both of the teams do try to play football too. So it's not going to be well, you'd hope that it won't be a boring game for neutral looking on. So yeah, hopefully that we can see that attendance figure even been top this year. Who knows? But yeah, it's just important, I suppose, that people do get out, support the girls.
Yeah, and then just at the weekend here as well, at the end, it was the end of an era. Stephanie Zambra calling time on her career, which saw her hit some great heights both at club level and then also at international level, and some adventures abroad as well in that time as well. What was she like as a teammate? Because I know your international careers did cross over for quite a time.
Yeah, they would have. I would have started playing with Steph back in the underage days, and we would have kind of come up through the ranks then together as well. And yeah, it was great to see her kind of grow. I think she obviously everyone talks. It's hard not to talk about the Puskas goal when you do reference Steph's career, because it really was kind of the stepping stone to a lot of positive things. I think in women's football in Ireland, it really brought it on, because I know even personally, a lot of people didn't even know the Irish team existed really until they heard about Steph, and then I'd be asked, on the street, oh, do you play with Steph? Like, rather than do you play with the Irish team, is more, she really became, I think, an icon for young girls. The first really of our time. Like, I remember walking through the airport, and it was the first time any of us had been stopped for a selfie. It was when Steph got stopped, and it was a huge. Obviously now that's going to be happening all the time, but it just shows kind of where it came from. And yeah, she's been a great. She was a great teammate when I played with her. Tough opponent when I played against her. We had many a battle in the WNL days as it was back then. But yeah, really, really great career, and I'm sure she's going to stick around the game, and it'll just be exciting to see now what's in store for her at the next chapter.
Yeah, because that 2014 Pushkas Award, of course, I think it kind of put it on her on everyone's radar, and as you said, it kind of the sort of reflected glory that the spotlight on her, it sort of spread out beyond that. But she was also part of the squad of players who went into that press conference in 2017 with the PFAI, and which was a bit of a sea change as well. I mean, it's hard to draw a straight line and say like that how key that was to them getting to the World Cup in 2023, but it was certainly important in changing perceptions and getting changes behind the scenes, and that's probably as big a legacy as that one goal against Wexford Youths in 2013 that led to that Pushkas award nomination.
Yeah, definitely, it was hugely important, and just the standards then increased as well. That was the main goal, I suppose, just to have that increase in standards, and which did allow the football then to increase the standard of the football increase, and yeah, like you said, then in turn that the qualification for the World Cup was off the back of that as well, and it really was that stepping stone that I think was needed just to drive the game forward. And yeah, she'll have a lasting legacy, that's for sure. And I'm sure we'll see her plenty of her in the media, and through her coaching company now as well. She's doing great things with champion coaching, doing like influencing a lot of young boys and girls to keep playing the game too. So I think it'll be hugely important going forward.
Yeah, so best of luck to her for what the next chapter is going to be. And of course, the Women's FAI Cup final live on RT2 and RT Player on Sunday, kickoff at 3 o'clock. Méabh De Búrca, thanks very much for your time.
Cheers, thanks.
All right, so Méabh De Búrca there speaking to me last Friday. Stephanie Zambra marked her final game with a goal, equalising for Rovers against Shelbourne on Saturday and going off to a standing ovation at Tallaght Stadium. And the Women's FAI Cup final, also between Athlone Town and Shelbourne, will be live on RT2 and RT Player, with coverage underway on Sunday from 2:15 in the afternoon. And in terms of the men's Premier Division, it was a Friday with some intriguing results, and we've got a big week coming up as well. Of course, Derry City and Bohs drawing 1-1. Patrick Hoban with a crucial equaliser for the Candy Stripes, and then Waterford and Drogheda drawn 0-0. Waterford now safe from relegation, but also they're the one team that can't win the league at this stage or can't get relegated. It's been that kind of season. And then tonight, Derry City playing Sligo Rovers at home, live on RT2 and the RT Player tonight from 7 o'clock is the coverage. 7:15 kickoff, and then Bohs and St. Pat's playing at 7:45 at Dalymount Park. And Pats, wouldn't have been thinking about them in terms of the title at any point, but mathematically they're well in it. And then this Friday, Drogheda United play Shamrock Rovers, Shelbourne play Waterford, Pats play Galway United, Dundalk play Derry City, and then on Saturday, Sligo Rovers play Bohemians. And Paul Corry still here with me. Let's focus on Derry City first. Obviously playing tonight, as I said, against Sligo Rovers, but they couldn't get past Bohs, who they had beaten in the cup semi-final just a week earlier. this is this is a really poor run they're on. I think it's 1 win in 8, but still it's very much in their hands. But it's just not looking very likely at this stage, although you could say the same for all the teams around them.
Yeah, it feels like we've been saying that about Derry for a period of time now, Raf, whereby opportunities are presenting themselves to Roy Higgins' side and they're just not taking them. And Friday night was another example of that. Going behind, they've obviously done well to carve out a point. Pat Hooban comes up with a big moment to get an equaliser. And then you have the chances where Paul McMullen hits the post from 4 or 5 yards out. And if that goes in and they get 3 points, you probably go, okay, Derry are in the driving seat and they are going to be the side to catch. There's still a lot of question marks I have in my head about Derry going on and winning this league. And I think after tonight's game, you'll probably have a clearer insight into whether or not chances and favorability is going to be on Derry's side, because the more games that go by that they don't win, Raf, the more I think they're not going to do it. The way I look at the Premier Division table at the moment, Shamrock Rovers sit on 52 with 3 games to go. They play Drogheda, they play Dundalk, and they play Waterford. I think they'll pick up 9 points from those games, which will put them on 61. Now, Derry, as it stands, sit on 51 with 4 games to go. If they draw tonight, the maximum they would be able to get is 62. So it shows you, I guess, the significance of every game between now and the end of the season. And from Derry's perspective, they can't really afford not to win 3 of those 4 remaining games. And with the form that you mentioned there of winning 1 in 8, I think that's difficult to see happening. I know some of the games, listen, they play Dundalk away. Dundalk are as good as down, but they could still overturn, or they could still pull a point out of the bag there. They obviously have to play Shells in the last game of the season, which could be a massive game for both clubs. There's a lot of pivotal games and pivotal moments coming, tonight being the start of that I could just see that there's too many banana skins in the way for Derry. I don't see them being a side right now that's in form that you could say, okay, they are guaranteed to win this game and that game. It's just not the case. And they're also playing a Sligo Rovers team tonight who have a lot to play for. Sligo could potentially push themselves into European contention with a win tonight, and that would be huge for John Russell's side. So Derry have big players, they've match winners within the squad, they have a lot of experience, particularly players who were part of that Dundalk dressing room that won a lot of trophies over a period of time. But every time a hurdle seems to present itself in front of them, they don't seem to be able to get over it, and that would be my worry for them. And particularly when you look at the top 3 teams, I think Shamrock Rovers are probably the only side that are showing real form that you could say, okay, they could get to a certain number of points. And that number of points for me is 61. And as it stands, I just don't see Shells or Derry getting to that number.
Yeah, and Derry have only scored 7, and this is just in the league, so ignoring the cup, where they've actually been more free-flowing in terms of the amount of goals. So 7 goals in 8 games, and still leaking at the other end, though, only 2 clean sheets in 8, which kind of tells the story. And Patrick Hooban, of course, getting the crucial equaliser, but he's one of the very few that's been scoring regularly, 14 goals this season. Danny Mullen, the other centre forward of the club, has 7, and then outside of that, then it's the goal return has been relatively meagre. Will Patching on 6, Michael Duffy on 5, and McMullen on 3 as well. And then you go further down the list. But from Sligo Rovers' perspective, as you said, they've had a pretty good season and are very much in with a shout of being in the mix for this European, for qualifying for Europe. But they also had the news then, John Russell at the weekend confirmed that he's extending his contract for a couple of years. And it's been a bit of a sea change from last season, where it was a bit of a struggle. This season, pretty positive for the most part, especially in that sort of summer period, with the exception of that trashing against Drogheda United when they went down 7-0. But it's been a positive turnaround there.
Yeah, it has, and particularly like you mentioned, Raf, since that summer break. I mean, there was probably a couple of people over the last 12 months, particularly the beginning of this season and the tail end of last season, that were maybe considering whether or not John Russell was going to be the man to take Sligo Rovers forward. So I was delighted to see him get a 2-year extension. I think the work that he has done this year is fantastic. The points that they've managed to accrue in the last couple of games and weeks, they've been one of the informed sides within the division, and you can start to see a bit more mould and a bit more shape to that squad. I think for John, finishing off this season, if they get European football, would be fantastic. But I think for him moving into next season is trying to keep as much of that squad together and building on what it is they've achieved to date this year. Recruiting players out to Sligo is never the easiest. From a player's perspective, the majority want to be based in Dublin, and there's plenty of clubs to choose from there. So attracting and getting the right player in will be extremely important in that case as well. But I just think when you look at the points that they've managed to rack up, the wins that they've had in recent weeks, the performances that they've put in, and just the whole consistency from the club perspective, I was delighted to see John get the extra 2 years onto his contract. And I think the club also, Raf, probably deserve a lot of credit. There's a number of clubs who might have pulled the trigger and decided that they wanted something different and to take it through a different direction. They stood by John Russell. They stood by his philosophy and what it is he was trying to achieve with that team. And I think that has bear fruit as the season has gone on. And they are, like I mentioned, one of the teams that have shown a bit better form than some of the other sides. And if they were to win tonight, I mean, that puts them level on points with Galway in fourth. And that gives them an unbelievable opportunity of progressing and getting European football. That would get money through the door from a prize money perspective. It would help them to recruit again with players and bringing them into the building. So you can't underestimate how important these remaining 4 games are for Sligo and for John Russell.
Yeah, and even mathematically, they're sort of technically in the title race in many ways as well. And it's the same thing you could say about Pats, who have an outside chance of the title themselves if they were to beat Bows tonight. I suppose the difference compared to some teams around them is momentum. Although what appears to be the way is it's just come a little bit too late. If this was 2 or 3 weeks earlier, maybe they would be in with a greater shout of winning it with just the way they've been playing. But they're going to be awkward one way or another, whether they somehow do a smash and grab and actually win the title in the most ludicrous circumstances, or the head-to-heads they have with some of the teams around them for Europe and title chasing. So they've Galway, Derry and Sligo apart from this Bows game tonight. So one way or another, Pats are going to play a part in how this all plays out.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess that what makes the league so enthralling is the fact that it's such a small, tight-knit division and so many teams have so much to play for with the remaining fixtures. For me, when I look at Pats and what they've done in the last couple of weeks, particularly off the back of the European run, I think, okay, they are putting down the marker for next year. And I would suspect that St. Pat's are going to be up there with Shamrock Rovers and Derry kind of competing for major titles. I just think the work that Stephen Kenny has done is fantastic. The players that he's brought in, he's getting the most out of Jake Mulroney. El Bazzetti looks good. If they can hold on to Mason Melia, they've got such a mould to the side that is so similar to what we saw with Dundalk, with wide players and being expansive, getting at teams. There's a real belief about their play, and what you saw in Dundalk is very much mirrored now into Stephen Kenny's St. Pat's team. And the recruitment has been very strong, and they haven't been shy in getting players into the building, and you would expect that will happen again next year. To your point, Raf, and if you think about what was the springboard for St. Pat's this year, it was absolutely that European run. And if they were to get European football again, given the position that they were in around this summer break, that would be a massive achievement for Stephen Kenny. And again, it would give him leverage to bring more bodies into the building. But I think what you can see at the beginning of the year, when they lost the likes of Sam Curtis and Doyle and co., it was hard to see the spine of the side that will take them forward. I think that has completely changed now, where you can absolutely see the players who are going to make up the basis of this St. Pat's team going forward. And if Stephen can bring in 1 or 2 bodies, they will certainly be one of the leading teams in the division next year. So it's a testament to the work that he's done. It's a testament to the players and the performance that they've produced over in recent weeks and some of the results that they've gotten. But I think when you look at the individuals they have in the building, the age profile of that squad in particular, they are a team that I look at on paper and go, okay, they're potentially going to, be the side that are going to push the likes of Derry and Shamrock Rovers next year.
Yeah, and then I suppose finally Shelbourne still leading the way despite the fact that they've been struggling for form completely, but they have Waterford on Friday, and Waterford are fading a little bit. But then looking at the stats in terms of the amount of goals they've been scoring, apart from that 3-2 defeat to St. Pat's a couple of weeks ago in a brilliant game to watch, of course. They haven't scored in their last 5 games in the league and cup. And apart from that Pats game as well, the last time Shell scored more than 1 goal in the league game is all the way back on the 28th of June against Galway, which coincidentally is also the same day Derry City also scored more than 1 goal in the league game. So there's something going wrong near the top. But for Shells, I think it's fairly simple. This Waterford game is a must win if they have any real aspirations of, I suppose, re-sparking that hope of going for the title with all the clubs they're chasing at the moment.
Yeah, and they've been in free fall for a period of time now, Raf, when it comes to getting points on the board. There's just no margin for error for Shells over these next 2 games. They have to beat Waterford. They have to be drawn at home. And I think when you look at the fixtures that they have left, 2 home games against those 2 sides, I think are probably fixtures that they would have pulled out and said, yes, they are ones that we would like to face. 1 win in 10 is just not good enough. That 1 win was against Dundalk, who were bottom of the table, and they just haven't amounted anywhere near enough points over the recent weeks and months. And if they had, they'd be home and hosed with games to spare. So it's hard to know what to expect from Shells. I mean, the second half performance in particular against Pats when they played in Tolka Park was strong. Yes, they pulled out 2 worldies from nowhere, but I actually thought the energy in their play was something that had been lacking over kind of recent weeks and months, and you wondered, did the burden of the title chase maybe get to them? They're still in pole position, which is crazy to say given the points that I've just mentioned, but there's literally no room for error. They have to beat Waterford. Waterford's season is pretty much done and dusted at this stage. They have to go then and beat Drogheda United, who again will probably psychologically preparing for the FAI Cup final and a potential playoff game. And then you could have a situation where they face Derry with a winner takes all situation if they were able to win those next 2 games. But again, similar to the Derry situation, Raf, in that it's hard to look at fixtures and say Shells are definitely going to win that, or they're definitely going to pick up points in against Waterford or Drogheda, because they've just been so inconsistent over recent weeks and months, and that is the whole as a team, but also some of the individuals just haven't been able to hit the heights of performances that we saw earlier on in the year. A lot of it will come back to Jarvis being out of the building and the goals that he has scored being taken out of the side. That has definitely impacted them, but they've definitely come down a gear or 2 as well in recent weeks and months. So when I again go back to my 61 points, and if I look at Shelburne and the games they have remaining, I think it's difficult to see them picking up 7 or more out of those 3 games. I think they will drop points along the way, and I struggle to see them beating Derry in the Brandywell if they need to on the last game of the season. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually think it's in Shamrock Rovers' hand.
When we're probably going to have to scrub a lot of episodes of this podcast when they had been written off at certain stages that they have no chance of coming back. But anyway, look, it's been that kind of no, it's been that kind of season anyway, for sure. But anyway, tonight we'll tell a bit of a story as well, depending on how Derry City get on in their game, and also in the other game between Pats and Bows as well. But anyway, that's it for today. We'll talk First Division next week when the playoff picture will be fully confirmed, preview Shamrock Rovers' next Conference League fixture against Larne, review the Women's Cup final, build up to the first of the Women's Euro playoffs with Aileen Gleeson naming her Ireland squad later this week, and there'll be Champions League chat, and of course the finishing line will be coming into view in the League of Ireland Premier Division. But Paul Corry, thanks very much for your time.
Cheers, Raf.